The wedding hall was glowing with flowers, white ribbons, and soft lights. Emily walked down the aisle, her heart pounding with excitement. She could see Brad waiting at the altar, smiling at her, holding her hands as if nothing could ever go wrong. For months, they had planned this day, dreaming about it, imagining it as the happiest moment of their lives. But Emily had noticed little things lately. Brad seemed distracted during their final dress fittings, checking his phone when he thought she wasn't looking. He had grown distant, often laughing at jokes she didn't understand or disappearing for moments without explanation. She brushed it off, telling herself it was just pre-wedding stress. After all, this day was supposed to be perfect. As she reached the altar, the crowd clapped and smiled, many whispering about how beautiful she looked. Emily's eyes met Brad's, and for a moment, she felt that old spark, the Brad she had fallen in love with years ago. She wanted to believe that nothing could ruin this day. She took a deep breath and smiled. The officiant began the ceremony. Vows were exchanged, and Emily tried to focus on the words, on the love they had shared, on the promises of a future together. Everything felt surreal. She could hear her own heartbeat echoing in her ears as Brad placed the ring on her finger. Then, suddenly, everything shattered. Brad's hand struck her cheek. A sharp, burning pain made her gasp, and the hall fell silent. Guests froze, eyes wide in shock. Emily's face burned with humiliation and disbelief. 1,000 thoughts raced through her mind. Why? How could this happen on her wedding day? She looked into Brad's eyes, searching for remorse, but found only anger and impatience. People whispered behind their hands. Her parents stared, horrified. Bridesmaids covered their mouths, unable to speak. Emily felt a mix of fear and fury rise inside her. She wanted to scream, to cry, to run, but she couldn't. She had to stay composed, at least for now. And then, almost instinctively, something inside her shifted. The pain on her cheek was nothing compared to the betrayal she had begun to sense over the past few weeks. The smile she forced through tears was not submission, it was the first spark of determination. This moment, as shocking and humiliating as it was, would not define her. Emily understood, even then, that she had to act carefully, but decisively. She could feel the energy in the room change. Everyone was watching, waiting to see how she would respond. The ceremony continued, but the world felt different. Emily realized she could no longer trust the life she had imagined with Brad. That single slap had revealed everything, and in that instant, a new plan began forming in her mind. She would not be a victim. Not today. Not ever. Emily stood frozen, her hands still tingling from the sting of Brad's slap. The room felt unreal, like she was watching a nightmare happen in slow motion. Guests whispered among themselves, their faces a mixture of shock, pity, and anger. Some looked at Brad with wide eyes, unable to believe what they had just seen. Others looked at Emily, silently questioning if she was okay. She felt exposed, humiliated, as though everyone could see her pain. She tried to focus on Brad, hoping he would apologize, that he would realize what he had done. But he didn't. His jaw was tight, his eyes cold, and there was a flicker of satisfaction in his expression that made Emily's stomach twist. Suddenly, it all started to make sense, the subtle irritations, the strange tension in their conversations, the feeling that he was not fully present with her anymore. Then she noticed Claire, standing near the front of the room with a sly smile. Claire had always been Brad's closest friend, the one he confided in, the one who seemed to understand him better than anyone else. But now Emily could see something darker in her expression, a hint of pride almost, as if she had been waiting for this moment. Emily realized with a sinking feeling that Claire had been feeding Brad's frustrations, encouraging him to act on them, pushing him toward this humiliating outburst. Emily's heart ached, but anger began to rise. How could someone she loved, someone she trusted with her entire life, humiliate her like this in front of everyone she cared about? She had always believed that Brad was kind, loving, and respectful. But the truth was undeniable, he had a side of him that he had hidden, a side that was cruel, selfish, and controlled by someone else's influence. Confusion mixed with betrayal. Her mind raced through every moment, trying to understand what had gone wrong. The way Brad had dismissed her concerns over the past months, the little lies he had told, the excuses he made, they weren't signs of stress or fatigue anymore. They were warning signs she had ignored. And now, with this slap, those warnings had turned into a painful reality. Tears threatened to fall, but Emily held them back. She couldn't let him see her broken, not yet. She had to stay composed, to observe, to understand. The humiliation she felt was sharp, but beneath it, a quiet determination began to grow. She realized that Brad was not the man she thought she knew. And Claire was part of the betrayal. In that moment, Emily understood something important. This was not just about a slap or a ruined wedding. It was about trust shattered, about lies and manipulation, about the person she had believed would love and protect her choosing to humiliate her instead. And while the pain was real, Emily also felt the first spark of something else, a resolve to not let this betrayal define her. She would find a way to take control, to reclaim her dignity, and to show Brad the consequences of his cruelty. Emily sat in her room later that evening, the events of the wedding replaying over and over in her mind. The sting of Brad's slap still burned her cheek, but now, a different kind of pain settled in, one she had ignored for months. She began thinking about the small signs she had brushed off, the things that didn't feel right at the time. There were the secretive phone calls he always took in another room, the way he would quickly end conversations when she walked in. She remembered the evenings he claimed to be busy with work but returned home late, looking guilty when she asked where he had been. At first, she had told herself she was overthinking. Maybe he was stressed. Maybe it was just pre-wedding tension. But now, it all looked different. Emily's mind drifted to the subtle insults he had made over time, always disguised as jokes. Comments about her appearance, the way she laughed, even the way she expressed her opinions. She had laughed along, pretending it didn't hurt. She had ignored the tiny, creeping doubts, convincing herself that love meant overlooking flaws. But now, those jokes felt like pieces of a puzzle that finally formed a picture she didn't want to see. Her thoughts wandered to happier times, to the moments she wished she could go back to. She remembered their first date, when Brad had made her laugh so hard she had cried. She remembered late-night talks, shared dreams, and quiet mornings in bed, feeling like nothing could touch them. Those memories made the betrayal even sharper. How could someone who had shown her such warmth also have such cruelty inside? Her sister, Hannah, knocked softly and entered the room, holding 2 cups of tea. She sat beside Emily, her hand on her shoulder. "I saw what happened," Hannah said gently. "I can't believe he did that. You didn't deserve any of it." Emily felt tears prick her eyes, but Hannah's presence was comforting. It reminded her that she was not alone, that she had people who truly cared about her. Hannah squeezed her hand and continued, "You've always been strong, Em. But sometimes we forget that strength also means knowing when someone isn't right for us. You deserve better than someone who humiliates you and treats you like this." Emily nodded, feeling both the weight of Hannah's words and the truth in them. She realized that the love she had believed in might have been one-sided, that Brad's kindness had masked selfishness and cruelty all along. For the first time since the wedding, Emily let herself cry, not just from pain, but from the release of acknowledging the truth. She understood that moving forward meant accepting what had happened, facing the reality of Brad's betrayal, and starting to think about her own life, her own happiness. Hannah stayed by her side, silent but supportive, letting Emily gather her thoughts. Emily knew one thing clearly: she would not let this betrayal define her. The red flags she had ignored were now lessons she could not unlearn. And with her sister by her side, she felt the first hint of hope that maybe, just maybe, she could rise above the hurt and find her strength again. Later that evening, Emily asked Brad to meet her in the small sitting room at her parents' house. The wedding chaos had settled, but the tension between them felt heavier than ever. Brad walked in, his suit slightly wrinkled, hair messy from the day's stress. He looked at her, almost amused, as if nothing serious had happened. "Emily, it was just a moment," he said casually, leaning against the wall. "I got frustrated. It wasn't a big deal." Emily froze for a moment, staring at him. Not a big deal? Her cheek still stung from the slap, her heart still racing from the humiliation in front of everyone she loved. Not a big deal, she asked, her voice tight. Brad, you hit me in front of everyone. You humiliated me. How can that be not a big deal? He shrugged, a smirk forming on his face. You're overreacting. Weddings are stressful. I lost my temper, okay? It happens. Emily felt a surge of anger. This was not just carelessness or stress. This was arrogance. This was selfishness. He didn't feel guilty. He didn't care that he had ruined the happiest day of her life. The truth hit her hard, Brad lacked remorse. The man she had trusted with her future had no understanding of the pain he caused. You don't even see what you did, do you? Emily said quietly, but firmly. Do you realize how much this hurt me? How much it shattered everything I thought we had? Brad rolled his eyes. You're being dramatic. I didn't mean to hurt you. Honestly, you're making this bigger than it is. Emily looked at him, her mind racing. All the little red flags, all the moments she had doubted him but ignored, they were pieces of the same picture. His charm, his smiles, the promises he made, they were empty. He only thought of himself. She realized that reasoning with him, trying to make him see how wrong he was, would accomplish nothing. For the first time since the wedding, Emily felt a sense of clarity. She didn't need his apology. She didn't need him to understand her pain. What she needed was a plan, a way to protect herself, to regain control, and to make sure she didn't get trapped in his selfishness ever again. Emily took a deep breath and squared her shoulders. You know what, Brad? I'm done explaining myself. I won't let this betrayal define me, and I won't let you control my life anymore. I need to think about my next steps carefully. Brad looked confused, as if her confidence startled him. He tried to speak, but Emily didn't let him. She turned and walked out of the room, feeling the first real spark of power since the wedding. The anger was still there, but now it was focused, channeled. She would not let him break her. She would rebuild herself and find a way to make sure he understood the consequences of his actions, without stooping to his level. In that quiet confrontation, Emily realized that her life would no longer be about Brad. It would be about her, and for the first time, she felt the courage to reclaim it. After the confrontation with Brad, Emily knew she needed space. She returned to her parents' home, seeking comfort in the familiar walls, the smell of her mother's cooking, and the quiet streets she had known all her life. She stayed in her old room, the one filled with memories from childhood, and let herself finally feel everything, the hurt, the anger, the disbelief. She cut off all contact with Brad. She ignored his calls and texts, refusing to let him reach her. For the first time in months, she didn't have to pretend everything was fine. She could cry, scream, or simply sit in silence without worrying about his reaction. It was painful, but it was necessary. Slowly, Emily began to rebuild herself. She spent time on things she had neglected, like reading the books she loved, taking long walks, and even practicing yoga to calm her mind. Each small moment reminded her of who she was before Brad's betrayal, and bit by bit, her confidence returned. She realized she didn't need him to define her happiness. Stories from wedding guests started reaching her too. Some people quietly confided what they had seen and heard about Brad, how he had argued with vendors, how he had spoken unkindly about Emily in private, how he seemed to enjoy manipulating situations to make himself look good. Each story confirmed what she had already begun to suspect: Brad's charming exterior hid arrogance, selfishness, and cruelty. The man she thought she knew was not the man she had married. Among the people who came to check on her was Mark, a family friend who had always been close to Emily and her parents. He had been quiet and respectful during the wedding, but now he showed her small acts of care, a reassuring word, a cup of tea, a thoughtful message. He didn't push her to talk or make her feel guilty, he simply reminded her that someone saw her worth. His support was subtle but steady, a gentle light in the darkness of her recent days. Emily began noticing the contrast between Brad and Mark. While Brad had humiliated and manipulated her, Mark treated her with respect and patience. She realized that trust, kindness, and genuine concern were possible, and that maybe, in time, she could let someone like Mark into her life again. But for now, her focus was on herself. During this retreat, Emily also reflected on her own strength. She had survived the public humiliation, faced Brad's cruelty, and still stood tall. Every tear she shed, every moment she spent alone, was shaping her into someone stronger. She understood that healing wasn't quick, but it was essential. By the end of her first week back at her parents' home, Emily felt a faint but growing sense of hope. She wasn't just escaping Brad, she was discovering who she really was, what she deserved, and how she would never let someone like him control her again. The path ahead was uncertain, but she knew one thing clearly: she had the strength to reclaim her life. Emily had spent days reflecting, healing, and observing from a distance, but she knew thinking alone wasn't enough. She needed proof, clear evidence of Brad's betrayal. She couldn't rely on suspicion or gossip anymore. She had to see the truth for herself and prepare for what came next. Slowly, she began piecing things together. She remembered overhearing wedding guests whisper about Brad's late-night outings and strange behavior before the wedding. She started asking subtle questions, listening carefully, and paying attention to small inconsistencies in his stories. Each answer, each detail, built a pattern she could no longer ignore. Emily discovered that Brad had hidden financial dealings. Bills and receipts she found accidentally suggested he had been transferring money secretly, keeping accounts she never knew existed. It wasn't just money, it was a symbol of his secrecy and manipulation, of a life she wasn't truly part of. Then came the other proof, harder to accept. Emily learned that Brad had been flirting with another woman for months. Friends who felt guilty or uncomfortable shared stories they had witnessed, things she had never imagined could happen to her. The betrayal cut deep, but it also clarified everything: Brad's arrogance, his charm, his smiles, they were masks to cover his selfishness. Emily also noticed the way Brad had manipulated family and friends. He had twisted situations to make himself look good, to shift blame, and to control how people saw him. Every story she heard, every piece of evidence, confirmed the truth she had felt all along: he had never truly respected her, never truly cared about her happiness. Anger surged through Emily, but she didn't let it consume her. She realized that rage alone wouldn't protect her or make things right. Instead, she decided to channel her feelings into careful planning. She documented everything quietly: notes, dates, details, even small observations that could later be useful. She didn't want confrontation or chaos yet, she wanted clarity, strategy, and control. Each night, she reviewed her notes, piecing together a timeline, making sense of Brad's patterns and lies. She thought carefully about how to use this information, not to destroy him, but to reclaim her dignity and show the people around them the truth. She imagined herself standing firm, confident, untouchable, while he could no longer hide behind charm or deception. Emily felt a new kind of strength forming. Her anger was no longer helpless, it was focused. She understood that knowledge was power and that every secret he had tried to keep from her was now a tool in her hands. For the first time, she felt like she had control over the situation, and the humiliation and betrayal she had suffered no longer had the final word. By the end of this phase, Emily knew two things clearly: Brad's true nature was exposed to her, and she was no longer the frightened, unsure woman he had thought she was. She was ready to take the next step, carefully, strategically, and with a purpose that would ensure she never felt powerless again. Emily knew it was time to take the first step. She wasn't going to lash out or create chaos, her goal was control, dignity, and truth. She decided to expose Brad in a way that showed everyone who he really was, without stooping to his level. She wanted him to see that she was calm, collected, and fully aware of his betrayal. She arranged a small, private dinner at a quiet restaurant, inviting Brad, his closest friends, and a few family members. On the surface, it looked like a casual gathering, friendly and polite. But Emily had a plan. She had prepared carefully, noting down all the lies, manipulations, and betrayal she had uncovered. Every detail was documented, every observation precise. The evening began normally. Brad smiled, tried to charm the guests, and casually bragged about his recent successes. Emily listened quietly, sipping her drink, letting him speak. She didn't react, didn't interrupt, but her eyes followed every word. She knew that patience would make the impact stronger. Then, gradually, she started asking subtle questions. Questions that seemed innocent at first, but slowly revealed the inconsistencies in Brad's stories. "Brad, didn't you say last week that the money for the venue was handled differently?" she asked, keeping her tone light. "I thought I heard something else." Brad stumbled for a moment, trying to correct himself. He laughed awkwardly, but Emily continued, calmly and politely, "And what about your comment to John about the trip last month? I wasn't sure how that fit with what you told your sister." The room went quiet. Brad's friends shifted uncomfortably, noticing the contradictions. Emily didn't accuse, she just guided the conversation, letting the truth come out on its own. She stayed composed, smiling politely, making it clear that she was in control. Brad's face changed. At first, it was confusion, then frustration, then panic. He tried to charm his way out, to laugh it off, but Emily had already anticipated his excuses. With each lie exposed, the shock in the room grew, and Brad realized that this was not a setup he could manipulate. The people he had counted on were now seeing him clearly. Emily felt a surge of satisfaction. Not from hurting him, but from the fact that she was reclaiming her story. She was no longer the embarrassed, powerless bride from the wedding day. She was composed, intelligent, and commanding respect. The control was hers, and she savored the quiet power of it. By the end of the dinner, Brad was isolated, flustered, and clearly aware that he had underestimated her. The friends who had once admired him now looked at him with doubt. Emily smiled inwardly. This was just the beginning, but already, she had taken her first strike, one that was clever, dignified, and completely under her control. A few weeks later, Emily attended a community gathering. It was a casual event, meant for families and close friends, but Brad decided to make an appearance. He smiled, laughed loudly, and tried to charm everyone, acting as if nothing had happened at the wedding. His confidence was false, but he carried it like armor, hoping no one would remember the humiliation he had caused. Emily stayed calm, watching from a distance. She had prepared herself for this moment, knowing that the evidence she had gathered over the past weeks would speak louder than any accusation she could make. She didn't need to yell, argue, or show anger, she just needed to be patient and precise. As Brad mingled, Emily joined the group he was showing off to. She listened to his boasts, his stories of success, his little jokes meant to win approval. Then, she started asking simple questions, the kind anyone might ask in conversation. "Brad, how did you manage the funds for the charity project last month?" she asked casually. "I saw some documents that seemed different from what you mentioned." Brad tried to brush it off, laughing nervously, but Emily continued, keeping her tone polite. "And there's this letter from one of your colleagues. It mentions arrangements you made without letting your team know. I thought it was interesting since you told everyone the project was a team effort." The people around them started to notice inconsistencies. Brad's smile faltered. Guests whispered quietly, exchanging glances. Emily calmly laid out small details, things that anyone could verify, nothing exaggerated. Each point subtly revealed Brad's lies, his manipulations, and his selfishness. The effect was immediate. Brad's friends and family began to see the truth. They realized that the charming man they had admired was controlling, deceitful, and unkind. Emily didn't raise her voice or attack him personally, but the facts alone humiliated him far more effectively than any anger could have. Brad's face turned red. He tried to recover, to charm his way out, but the room had already shifted. People now looked at him with doubt, disappointment, and even anger. Emily stood tall, composed, smiling politely but with quiet authority. She was not angry, she was in control, and everyone could see it. Emily felt a calm satisfaction. She had reclaimed her story, her dignity, and her power. Brad's attempts to appear flawless had failed. She had exposed his betrayal without stooping to his level, proving that integrity and intelligence were far stronger than charm and manipulation. By the end of the gathering, Brad was isolated. People who once admired him now kept their distance. Emily walked away with her head held high, knowing she had won without losing herself. The community saw the truth, and Emily felt the full weight of her strength. She had taken control, not with anger or cruelty, but with dignity, and it felt more powerful than she could have imagined. After the public gathering, Brad's world began to shrink. People who had once supported him or admired him started keeping their distance. Friends who had ignored his flaws now questioned his behavior. Family members who had defended him began to see the truth. He was isolated, and for the first time, he felt the weight of his actions. Emily, on the other hand, felt a quiet relief. She had endured humiliation, betrayal, and anger, but she had come out the other side with her dignity intact. Seeing Brad face the consequences of his own choices gave her a sense of closure she had longed for since the wedding. She no longer needed to fight to be heard or respected, her truth had already spoken for itself. She made a decision that felt liberating. She would focus on herself, on personal growth and happiness, rather than on revenge. She understood that holding on to anger could only hurt her in the long run. Instead, she devoted her energy to the things that truly mattered, rebuilding her confidence, nurturing meaningful relationships, and rediscovering the life she had put aside for Brad. Emily began reconnecting with friends and family, people who had always cared for her but had been overshadowed by the chaos of her relationship. She laughed again, shared stories, and found joy in simple moments she had forgotten. Her sister Hannah continued to be a pillar of support, reminding Emily of her worth and cheering her on in her journey of healing. Mark, the family friend who had quietly supported her, remained a steady presence in her life. He never pushed her or tried to influence her decisions. Instead, he offered guidance, comfort, and a listening ear whenever she needed it. Emily began to see him as a symbol of trust, stability, and hope, a reminder that not everyone in her life would betray or hurt her. With each passing day, Emily felt lighter. The anger and hurt that had once consumed her were gradually replaced by confidence and clarity. She started pursuing her passions, spending time on hobbies and goals she had neglected. She realized that her happiness didn't depend on anyone else, it came from within. Emily also reflected on how much she had learned from the experience. She understood the importance of boundaries, self-respect, and trusting her instincts. She knew she would never allow anyone to treat her with disrespect again. The lessons she had learned from Brad's betrayal had made her stronger, wiser, and more aware of her own value. By the time a few months had passed, Emily felt a profound sense of peace. Brad's manipulation no longer had any power over her. She had reclaimed her life, her dignity, and her sense of self. The future felt full of possibilities, not defined by past pain but by the strength and resilience she had discovered within herself. Months had passed since the wedding disaster, and Emily finally felt like herself again. She had healed from the pain, the shock, and the humiliation. Every day, she reminded herself that Brad's betrayal did not define her. His anger, his arrogance, and his cruelty were his choices, not hers. What mattered now was her own life, her own happiness, and the strength she had found within herself. Emily embraced her independence fully. She made decisions for herself, pursued her passions, and spent time with people who truly valued her. She no longer waited for anyone's approval or validation. The confidence she had rebuilt over time gave her a sense of freedom she had never felt before. Every small victory, whether finishing a project, taking a solo trip, or simply enjoying a quiet evening, felt like reclaiming a piece of herself that Brad had tried to overshadow. She reflected on how far she had come. Betrayal had hurt her deeply, but it had also taught her resilience. Humiliation had made her cautious, but it had also made her wise. Emily realized that life could be cruel, and people could disappoint, but rising above deceit, holding on to dignity, and protecting one's self-worth was the greatest victory anyone could achieve. Mark remained a steady presence in her life, not as someone to replace the past, but as a reminder of kindness and trust. Friends and family celebrated her strength, not just her survival. She laughed freely again, feeling joy without guilt or fear. Emily had learned to value herself in ways she never had before, and that self-respect gave her power that no betrayal could take away. Looking back at Brad, she felt no anger, only clarity. He had shown her his true nature, and in doing so, he had unintentionally strengthened her. She understood that revenge wasn't about making someone else suffer, it was about reclaiming one's own life and refusing to be defined by their mistakes. That realization was liberating, and it made her feel unstoppable. Emily also realized that her story was bigger than herself. It was about courage, the courage to face pain, to recognize lies, and to stand firm even when others doubted her. It was about self-worth, the understanding that being treated with respect is not optional, and no one has the right to take it away. And it was about justice, not the kind found in punishment, but the kind found in dignity, clarity, and truth. As she walked through her days, Emily felt a deep sense of empowerment. She had survived betrayal, humiliation, and manipulation. She had taken control of her life and her story. And now, she knew with certainty that nothing could shake her confidence or her self-respect again. Life could hurt, people could betray, and moments could humiliate, but Emily had learned that rising above it all, reclaiming dignity, and staying true to oneself was the ultimate revenge. In that, she had found freedom, strength, and peace, a life fully her own.